Hello, Cheryl. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So this is an Ask Pam, but it's a bonus because this Ask Pam includes Pam's very dear friend, one of Pam's very best friends. Well, Pam only has like two best friends, so Cheryl Carter. And I asked Cheryl to join me on the podcast because to answer the caller's question, and you just heard the question, but to answer her question, I wanted to not only give my my perspective, but the person who poured into me, the person who mentored me, who got me off the ledge so many times. and so I thought, it's great to have one person, but to have the person who led the person and poured into the person would just be awesome. So, yeah. So Cheryl, before we dive into talking about college planning and scholarships for homeschoolers, if you could tell the listeners a little bit about you and your background.
Okay, so I've been homeschooling for a while. I don't want to say how long because then I'll seem old, but I will say this, that all three of my older children graduated and went on to college with academic scholarships, generous academic scholarships, national academic scholarships. They went on to be very successful in college, the three older ones. As a matter of fact, we kind of have a joke in our family. All of my kids graduated college with honors. In other words, they had the honor stole because they either achieved honors in college, and the youngest girl, actually was going to be the valedictorian of her college. And so they were very well, and I mention that because I want people to know they were very well prepared for college. And they went on, I'll kind of hold on to their personal lives. I won't say where they went to college, but if I mention where they went to college, they all went to very well-known, very elite, very competitive colleges and graduate schools, and doing quite well. I'm currently homeschooling now because we had a gap. So we have 9-year-old twins now, so we're homeschooling those. But in addition to helping my kids, over the years, I've helped so many kids in my homeschool co-op, not just in my homeschool co-op, but nationally. Just people will call me and say, well, Cheryl, I had this problem. I want my kid to go to college. Well, I want them to be able to get a scholarship, or I want them to be, and what do I have to do to prepare them? And so when I'm speaking, I'm not just speaking about my experience. I know some homeschool speakers, they come and they'll say, well, let me tell you, this is my theory. And they may have had 2 kids get into college, which is great. However, I can't even count how many kids I've helped get into college because I'm sort of the unofficial homeschool guidance counselor. So I know a lot about different colleges and what to do for your kid to get into college and how to be adequately prepared to get into college and to get into college doing well and with scholarships and the like. So I'm not sure if I
Yeah, you did.
And I'm also on the board of Homeschooling Legal Defense on the compassion board. So that's kind of fun. So I've had to learn and know things with homeschooling just from a broad national perspective also. So.
Awesome. Hopefully, I'm not sure if that picked up the sound, but what Cheryl just said is she's also on the board of Homeschool Legal Defense on the national board. And what was that other part you said?
The compassionate board. So it's a board that actually we help actually single moms and others who might not be able to get money for homeschooling. And
I didn't know that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so maybe we could talk about that.
Yeah.
But, and I've written tons of books on curriculum, mainly college prep curriculum, how to get mainly writing and preparing your kids for college. Although I have done some stuff with the younger kids, but mainly preparing your kids, making sure that they are on target to do well in college. And the reason why I mention my kids, and I generally, when I refer to, by the way, I should probably say for this interview, when I say my kids, I do consider all the kids that I've helped, I consider those my kids.
And my kids are part of your kids too.
Your kids are my kids. Right. Yeah. When I talk about him, I talk about your son. He's my kid.
Yeah.
So I'll make the distinction when I'll usually say kids with the last name Carter when I'm specifically talking about my in-home homegrown kids there.
Right. Okay, awesome. Right. So now let's just jump into college planning for homeschoolers. What advice do you have for the caller about the college planning process for homeschoolers? And do you
All
see
right.
a distinction, a difference between, homeschooled students and traditional school students?
Actually, I do. Now, I tend to tell homeschooling students have what I call the homeschool advantage, because you can look at the college that you want your child to go to, and you can tailor make those courses so the kid will look like they have to be at that college. So if you have, for instance, I think I'm jumping around, so stop me, Pam, if I jump around too much. But for instance, the reason why I say it's important to plan, you can't let your kid be in the 11th and 12th grade and say, okay, now what do I do? I really encourage homeschoolers to start thinking 7th, 8th grade. 9th grade, you still have some wiggle room, so you're okay. Now, before I get into particulars, I should just say this, and everybody should just know this, no matter what state you're in, no matter what the homeschool regulations are, you need 4 years of English. And we would say those Englishes are typically, well, let's just say 9, 10th, 11th. I could get into how they could look different. Math, I usually give my kids, even if they're not interested in majoring in math, you want to do 4 years. And I know some people will say, but in public schools, some of the kids do 2 years and some of them only do 3 years. You want to do 4 years of math. Even for my kids who are liberal arts majors, I still had them do 4 years of math. You want to have 3 years of history, and in that history, I just spoke to somebody yesterday. She called me and she said, "Oh, my daughter took history." I said, "Well, did she take government and did she take economics?" 2 separate courses, and a lot of homeschoolers don't realize that those courses tend to be half-year courses, but they have to take them. Foreign language, and now here is where, if you want to get into the competitive schools, now I do know some schools, even that you could get in without language, and I even know some Christian colleges where it's not that important if you have a language. If you want your kids to go to the most competitive colleges, I would always say include a language. Now we could probably come back to, there's ways that you could, if your kid is not good at a language and you didn't do a language, there's ways you could get around that, and there's different things you could do to have your kid take a language, but we're not gonna talk about that now. But they should take a language, math, the sciences, 4 sciences, and not just general science. You want biology, chemistry, physics. You could do oceanography, astronomy. Like, you could make it different. But those are the basic things that every child should really take. And so it's important that they take those. It's important that they take those courses. And the reason why I mention that is because if your kid is in high school, typically high school kids are just going to take it. They're going to follow the program, the guidance counselor, the teacher is going to make sure your kids take those. And so it's really important for homeschoolers that you remember to take it, and that your transcript looks college ready. You can't just, so I see sometimes homeschoolers will say, well, my kids didn't do really great in math, so they took general math. No, there's ways around that. I'm not going to get into it now, but there's ways around it, because they have to take those basic strong math. We want the algebra, we want the trigonometry, we want the geometry. We want those, even pre-calculus, we want those on the transcript. And again, there's ways, if you tell me, and I know people tell me all the time, my kids are not math ready, or they're not math kids, or they'll say, well, they're not going to major in it. And I'm not saying major, but there's some ways, and I have another course where I speak on secrets that homeschoolers should know, and I get into all those, how you can get around that. So but it's too complicated right now. Not as complicated as you think, but just to say for right now, I guess I'm giving a long answer to a short question. Make sure that you, first of all, that you academically have all your ducks in a row. You can't just put, like, I see this all the time. People come to me, don't put reading on a high school transcript. Please, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, do not put reading on a high school transcript. And I've seen people approach me and they have reading on a high school transcript. Use also the lingo. It's literature. Even if they say, well, I have my kid reading. Oh, no. It's literature. It's literature. Even if you have special needs kids, and I know there might be some of you, I don't know, some of your listeners might have special needs kids, even that, and if you have a special needs kid and they might be doing some things that might not in the traditional way be called high school, there's still a way you could write it down so that it looks different. So it has to look like a college transcript. Just like you want them, it's funny, you don't want them to stand out where it's different, it's something wrong. And you want them to stand out. It's interesting, it's a balance. you want them to stand out on their transcript. You don't want them to stand out so much that they don't look like a typical kid. Now, one of the things I do when I tell people to do their transcript is, and I guess I'm different than other homeschools. Other homeschools, and I've heard them say, oh, I want them to look exactly like a public school transcript. I don't want them to look like a public school transcript. I want them to look like a private school transcript. Now, private school comes very close to what a public school transcript looks like, but it's not. It gives you more, it's more self-defined, it's more strict, it's more narrow, and that's the kind of transcript we want.
Awesome. That was a lot. It's a great starting point because it's the academic planning. It's forward thinking. It's being intentional because you can't go back and do 2 years of a foreign language if you've never done a foreign language. You can't go back and do, 4 years of English in your senior year if you've never, done the progression. And especially, like you said, with the math. And I make all my kids, thankfully, my third one loves it, but, push through to the math because, you need to have at least that algebra 2 for that SAT. So it's important to make sure you're doing that and working with the students. So that's a great starting point with jumping off. And let me say this to the listeners. If your head is like mine, the way I was, maybe 8 years or so ago when Cheryl and I would just sit and talk and she walked me through how to do all of this. Help is on the way. Like I'm going to share something at the end of this and you'll be able to totally breathe because she is a fantastic resource and she does this and provides these wonderful resources for the homeschool community that you definitely want to take advantage of. So at the very end, I had to say it out loud so I wouldn't forget. I wrote myself a note here that I'm going to share those. We'll share that what she has, her offerings, her courses, her books and things to help families because it makes a huge difference. I know the support that you gave me and the counseling, the guidance and the, do this way and don't do this, that, made all the difference. In addition to the soft skills stuff, like he's looking out the window doing chemistry, like, what are we going to do? And, just even the advice you gave, I'll have to share this since we're talking about academic planning, but you shared my son's brain was not developed to the point where he was ready in the 10th grade, ready at 15 to do algebra 2. And you told me, I will share this. I don't know if you remember this because this has been almost 10 years now because not 10, he's 20.
It's more than that.
6 years. No, yeah. So it was like when he was 15. So, but you said, well, flip it. Do geometry because he's a spatial learner. He'll be able to get the formulas. And I'm like, I can't flip geometry. It's algebra 1, algebra 2, geometry. I'm like, I'm telling you what it is because you're like, Pam, it's okay. You remember that? I remember that you said, yes, you said, just get to the algebra 2 later. It's okay. And it made all the difference. He was excited about the math. It just made sense. It was a great, it was just perfect. So even that kind of advice and advising with their transcript is helpful. So that was good. Thank you, Cheryl. That was really good.
Yeah, because sometimes what it is with our kids, and this is why I said with the homeschool family, sometimes homeschoolers spend most of their time trying to fit into public school modes. And the truth of the matter is, here's the thing, we could flip and we could do anything we want. We can really do anything we want. So you could even introduce a certain English that your kid likes. You could introduce, you could flip the math. Now, usually I look at developmentally and personality where the kid is, but you can just do it and kind of move it around. And some parents get caught up in like, oh, I can't do that, but you really can. There's all kinds of little things that you could do that a lot of parents don't realize.
Right. You said something that was really good, the homeschool advantage. And I remember years ago when you told me that, I was like, what? I was like, and when you explained it, it made sense. But I have to say, before I'm going to jump ahead a bit, but we'll come back or come back to this topic in terms of scholarships. One thing I would tell families all the time that, especially homeschool families, use your homeschool advantage with the scholarship process. Yes. So he wrote a lot of his essays during the school day. Now he did dual enrollment. So he was taking English at our local community college, getting college credit for that. So he had English credit, but a part of his schedule for the week was the essay writing. So, build that into your schedule. So you can, take advantage. I mean, there's so many creative ways to do so many creative things with with your lifestyle and with homeschooling. The other thing I want to say too, which just reminded me. So for those of you who are longtime listeners who may know, but my son is in art school. He goes to Ringling College of Art and Design. He's majoring in illustration. He's a visual thinker. I mentioned this before in the podcast. He has dyslexia. And so, but he's doing extremely well in school and, the whole nine. And so, the other thing, I wanted him to have science because I love science. I'm like a science nerd. My undergraduate was in engineering. I'm just, when it comes to science, I'm just a nerd. Life sciences, physical science. I love all of it. And so I had him do physics. And I'm going to explain this in a second because it's very similar to a college course that he's actually took a semester ago. But he did physics for animators. Mm-hmm. And even though it talked about the principles, it related it to like the way objects move through space. So when you see something on the big screen and it looks so lifelike and, all these live action films that we just love and and the reason why things look so real and it's so believable, like, it's like, oh, can a lion really talk? Well, yeah, when you base things that are not true kind of in the realm of truth, when it seems like it could actually do that, like when it bounces, it's going to squash. They call it like squash and whatever, like it elongates. It kind of like, and little things like even with the Doppler effect, when sound close is do, 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 and far away. I remember once I had to say this, we were driving somewhere once when my kids were little and the sound was like doom, doom, and we got closer and I said, that's the Doppler effect. And I was explaining how sound, and my kids were like, huh? They could care less about the Doppler effect. But I explained the distance and sound waves and they were just like, whatever, Mom. So anyway, so I say that to say on his transcript, it was physics for animators and It was what he needed. And so one year when he had economics on his course listing, because I said, what classes are you taking next year? We were just chitty-chatting about it. And he said, he showed them all to me. One of his liberal arts said economics. I literally panicked. And I'm like, no, we need to talk to your academic advisors. No way you can take economics. And so he said, no, Mom, it's okay. So I said, well, let's like message her, and all that. And we did. And she talked to me. She said, no, it's economics for artists. It's on contracts. It's on negotiation. It was the business of art. And I thought, oh, this is so cool. So I say that to say, a lot of colleges, they're preparing you for that next step. So we can prepare them. It's okay, like you said, to take advantage and to be creative with their interests, their abilities, kind of where they are, and to work with that. So.
Right. But that's what I call and that exactly what you said. I call it the homeschooling advantage. I think one of the things my son said, and I think he's been on your podcast. I'm not sure.
He has. I'm going to link his episode in the show notes. Yes. He's working on his PhD. I forgot to say that in your intro there. He's working on his PhD now. Yeah. He inspires me.
Well, it's interesting that he said, oh, Mom, not only was college easy for them, but he said, Mom, getting away from you, college was so much easier because they already did everything that usually. So like even with homeschools, there's a way to do. It's not just having your kids transcript, but preparing them for college in such a way that's easy. And my reason for doing it is, I don't just want my kids prepared for college so they could do well. I do want them to do well, but I want them to make a difference. And that's just why I want them to make a difference. So my kids, each one of them, they were so well prepared for college that they were doing altruistic work and they were doing missionary work and they were doing all these other things and still maintaining A's because it was so easy, but they were able to do so much. Like my son, who he doesn't have any interest in it now, but his first year of college, he was teaching kids who didn't know English. Why? Because he had the time and he was able to put in those hours and he didn't even get paid for it. I think it was like I think that when university went, he had to put in some volunteer hours. But my point was, but even beyond that, he was always doing things, and the same thing with my daughters. They're always doing things that help, that made a difference in other people's life. I'm really a strong proponent that we're here to help each other, and so that we're and so I see this. It's so important that to me, I want kids, particularly this is why I want more homeschool kids to get scholarships. I want kids to get scholarships. I want kids to make a difference. I've seen some kids that get scholarships and the parent goes bragging, oh, my kid got here, or my kid got there. And I'm like looking and say, but the kid did nothing for those around them, nothing for the college community, nothing. just
Yeah.
nothing. You know, I recently saw a child, and the kid was in and went to anyway, very elite college, and the parent had did all these maneuvering, outright lying, to get the child in school. Sorry, Pam, but I had to come and say
yes, we know about that.
and they know how to use and they lie. Thank God the parent was anyway. And I said to the kid, "Were you?" And they were like, "Oh, well, I called my uncle to help me with my classes." And but the child had did not, they were just so much into themselves. They had did nothing to make a difference at this campus they were in. And I could look at the other campuses now I'm talking about all my kids, which includes your kids. When I look at each, they are all making a difference on the campuses that they are in. They're all making a difference in life, and that's truly, truly, truly what we want our kids to do. If you think about it, you want, hopefully most of your listeners, you want your kids to go to college, not just to go to college, not just to make money, not just to brag, but you want them to go because they're going to make a difference in somebody's life. And I'm hoping, and I even tell you this, and this Pam may not be, I probably don't sound like an entrepreneur when I say this, don't get my stuff if your kids aren't going to make a difference. If your kids aren't going to make a difference and make somebody's life better, do me a favor, don't even buy my stuff. Don't do, because I really, if you ask me who I really want to help, I want to help kids who make a difference. Mm-hmm. I want to help parents who want kids to make a difference. And I'm not saying go out and, save the world per se, but you can make a difference on your campus. Be the kind of kid who's going to go out there when you see somebody sitting alone, who might even be suicidal. We don't talk about those kind of things. That your kid is going to be the kid who's going to step out and go and speak to them. That can make a difference. Your kid could be the one. One of the things my son is doing now, besides, as he graduated, he's like, Mom, I wanted more. And I'm not sure if he spoke about it. He wanted more to see more kids get scholarships. So he's serving on certain committees that he doesn't get paid for. Works, but he wants to. And the same thing if you look at my other, they're doing my kids, DJ, your kids, the kids who I help. I think of one of the other children I helped. She might be watching this, Caroline. She went on to Taylor University and she made a tremendous effect at Taylor. She did some great publishing. I mean, I want to see kids make a difference. And I'm hoping that most people want a scholarship for their kids, not just to get a scholarship, but because their kids are going to make a difference. So.
I love that you said that, because when you don't have the financial worry, this is one thing that I definitely say to my own kids, the Andrews, but I also tell my students too. but I do. And I tell them, when you don't have the money concern and the money issue, you're able to serve. I remember one of my students who wants to do pre-med, or at least, something, and then go on to med school. I just shared with her really what she can do with medicine for communities that don't have access to quality healthcare, or underserved communities globally, just giving her a global vision. And I said, and so when you're free with your finances, you can do so much more. And that reminds me of, and I'll link this episode in the show notes as well. But when I worked with a couple of my son's peers at Ringling, helping them win a grant, they won a $10,000 grant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gosh. Yes.
Yeah. And I interviewed one of them on my student leader episode, but when they won that grant, it allowed them to travel that summer, 2 summers ago, to Nairobi, Kenya, to serve children at a children's home or an orphanage to teach art. And I was able to travel because we go there a lot, but so I traveled there. I rearranged my schedule to be there at that time because I wanted to witness it, because I knew their hearts to serve. But not being able to have the finances. So this grant that they won, the scholarship that they won, allowed them to do it. It gave them a stipend. It covered their travel, immunizations. They presented this project around their major art. But to watch kids learn primary colors and watch kids paint and create for the first time was indescribable. Like, as a mom in general, I was like, and these girls they're just so dear to me. They're like my other daughters and my campus daughters, And so, but you're right. It's more than just bragging rights. It's more than that. It's about being free financially to serve. It really is. I love that you said that. There's another thing I wanted to talk about. And I think this happens a lot with homeschoolers, or it's at least perceived. And I'm going to tell you why, because I'm going to say the word and then I'm going to explain why. Mommy grades. Those 2 simple words.
Yes.
And we're just going to let that settle. Mommy grades. So I've met people where that, I've explained, I homeschooled my kids all the way through, and I've heard people say, oh, you could just give your kids A's all the way. And I just thought, wow, people really have that perception of mommy grades. And so let's talk a little bit about what mommy grades are, um, how we can avoid it, why it's important, just what mommy grades are. And I purposely did some things to make sure that my kids had experiences and, continue to have experiences outside of home where they're reporting to other teachers, they're getting grades. I'm not inflating grades,
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk about mommy grades, what it is, the dangers of mommy grades, if you could talk on that.
Well, mommy grades typically are, like you said, with homeschool moms, we all have this thing. We think our kids are brilliant. And so they may be 7 years old and they're just getting toilet trained. I'm not talking about a kid with special needs, but we go like, oh, little Johnny is so brilliant. And so they have typically, they'll give their kids A's. Colleges know that, and that's sometimes why they ask more of homeschool students. You really want to authenticate your grades. Particularly when you go and you're competing for other scholarships. If you think because my kid got A, that then they're going to get a leg up over somebody else. No, not necessarily. Matter of fact, I can say no. So the major thing, without getting into it, because there's several methods you can do it, but you really want to make sure that your grades are, or they're authentic. And for instance, you can't have the kid get a ACT grade, a low ACT grade in math, and give the child an A. Right. Your homeschool looks very suspect with that. My kids always had their grades, and sometimes they would get mad at me because I wouldn't give them a high grade just because they felt like they should get a high grade. And let me tell you, parents, that really served them. Do I have time to tell a quick story?
Yeah,
please?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
So, I mean, I was so hard on grades that one year my daughter, the older one, was in Columbia University. She was there for a summer program, a pre-college program, which I assume you talk about that too. But anyway, so it was very competitive. It was very, very competitive, the pre-college program. Anyway, so she was in it, and she had to come home just for like one night because we had a dental thing. So when she was coming home, she said, "Mom, I'm handing in this paper tomorrow. Can you just read it?" So I read through the paper, and of course, being a homeschool mom I marked it all up. And I said, well, this is wrong. And you could have made this argument stronger. And if you look at it, you really didn't have the 3 causes for reason on this one. And you didn't use enough persuasion to take that. I wrote with paper, and I said, you know what? You're going to get a D in the paper. So she came back from the dentist and she looked at the paper, and she was like, because her father was driving her back to campus that night. And she looked at the paper and she said, Mom, because it was a very, very intense program. Just so you know, it was a very intense program. But so she said, Mom, I have to write 2 other papers tonight. She says, I don't have time to redo this one over. So I said, well, hon, sorry to say, so this is when you're going to get a D. And I gave her a whole lecture. You should do better, blah, 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 blah. So she handed the paper in. Next few days, she called me and she said, guess what, Mom? I got an A on my paper. I said, the one that I marked all up? And she said, yeah. She said, you realize, Mom, you're harder than a Columbia professor?
That's funny.
I mentioned that because I would rather be hard, but my kids, like I said, my daughter was, and I won't say what university she was at, but she was at a very competitive university where she was going to be the valedictorian. And that's not to say, let me be clear. And when I talk about all my kids, all the kids I help, I try, much like you do, Pam, to make sure that they get, now I should probably give a qualified. Well, let me finish my statement first. I try as much as possible to get them to choose a college that's right for them. I've seen some kids get into colleges because the college is a really good name, or they get caught up in, I want to go to an Ivy, but they spend their whole time, they don't have a social life, the head is in the book, suicide rates are higher, and I'm not saying your kid's going to commit suicide if they go to an Ivy, I'm not saying that, but you want to make sure, and that's why I love what you do, Pam, because you really, sometimes we're talking as friends, you really go out of your way. I mean, I don't know if your parents even know this. You labor over going out of your way to make sure these kids are applying to the right colleges, the right fit for them socially, academically, professionally. They're going to be able to get it. Like there's some colleges that are more research. So if your kid's like a research person, they want to go there. There's some schools, that if your kid's not a good test taker, there's some schools you don't want to go to. You just don't want to go to. You want to go to something that's going to do more experiential. But anyway, Pam is really, really great at that. And so it's just important that we do that when you are looking at it, so that you don't fall into just giving them mommy grades and anything. You want again, and you want, there's ways to authenticate their grades. The SAT and the ACT is one side. There's courses, there's CLEP courses, AP courses, college classes. There's all kinds of ways. And you're absolutely right, by the way, Pam. More people, if more people can give them a grade, then just it looks authentic. It looks more authentic. So if you're giving it the grade, and of course you can't put. And I know some kids are just not good test takers. That's true, but you just can't give your kid an A if on the verbal skills they're barely in the 25th percentile on the SAT. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. That was really good. So thank you for that. So if we could transition and talk about, so we talked about courses, transcripts, mommy grades, a subject I hadn't thought of until you mentioned it. But let me see, what would be another really good topic? Let's talk about, what would you think next?
Well, I think the other point where homeschoolers that they miss is deadlines. Homeschoolers are notorious for deadlines because we do the same thing. We assign our kids a research paper. I don't know if you were like me. Let me speak for myself. I would assign my kids research papers, and because I had life just happens, I would forget that I assigned them a research paper. And so
can I interrupt you for a second?
Please.
I probably one-upped you. So when my kids were younger, and you're right, the deadlines, and we'll come right back to that. But I remember, and it speaks to forgetting. So when it was just the three before, we got Abby, the three older ones would play hide and seek, and they would purposely put their brother in the, like he would always hide in the closet. Alex would always just hide in the closet. And so, and this was actually my technique. Sometimes I say, okay, let's go play hide and seek. And I would start counting, and then I'd walk away. I'd start doing something else. And then I would forget he's still in there. And you know him, his personality. He's like, he's my military kid. He's the one that wants to do West Point, serve, be a leader in the military. He follows like instructions to the T. He wouldn't move until he was found. And until we were like maybe going to the library or something, like, where's your brother? And we're like, oh, he's still like, and he poor little thing in there sleep, sucking his fingers. So I get that. You're right with the deadlines. I know exactly where you're going. I was the same way, loose with the deadlines, and it doesn't serve them with, that's life.
And even if you tend to be a mom that says, no, but I get up at 8 and we start, if you're homeschooling, life happens. If you have more than one child, life happens. No, I'm going to take that back. Even if you have one child, because sometimes parents of one kid, they get pulled all over if they're homeschooling because people feel like, oh, I could ask you because you only have one kid. So we tend to be a little bit loose with the deadline. We're like, okay, we're supposed to start school at 8:30, but if we start at 8:39, what's the big deal? So what if we start at 11 o'clock? And, and it serves us, but we got to be careful because when it comes to college planning, this is where I always refer people back to you, Pam, because you really got to know what your deadlines are. You got to know, when do you take the SAT? When do you take the ACT? I had someone post in the homeschool group, and they said, oh, my kid's been taking the AP. She was taking some AP, AP history, and she said, where do I go to get the AP exam? Well, it was May.
It's too late.
It's too late.
Yeah.
And and her point was like, oh, but I was doing this course, and we just get really, really lax with that. And I think that's why it's important. I do think that homeschoolers get a calendar and know when the schedules, when are the AP exams given? What's the process? What do I have to go through? When are the CLEPs given? What do I have to do to take a CLEP? When do I register for college classes? If my kid is doing a college class. It's just, that's like notorious. And it's really sad because sometimes I've worked with a kid and I'm like, so I could see they would like ace the SAT, but they missed the deadline. Or they missed, and you probably see this all the time, they missed the deadline for a scholarship that they would be perfect for. And they missed the deadline. Now, having said that, I don't want anyone listen to me saying, oh, Cheryl must be perfect. I can tell you this because I missed several deadlines. God's been really gracious to me. So like my son who won one of the most generous scholarships, I missed the PSAT deadline. Now in our case, we were moving around, and when I say moving around, we were like really out of our home. So we were moving around, but I could tell you, I missed deadlines. And I would like to say, oh, it wasn't a big deal, but a lot of times my kids also miss some opportunities because I missed some deadlines. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's really important. And that's, again, like where I come back to you because you always like, okay, parents, they have to know this. Like even, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but you spoke about the Common App. And I tell people to listen to the podcast because even if your kids' scholarships are, years away, because most of the scholarships, the questions that they ask, they don't really change from year to year.
They don't.
So, and understanding the whole thing about, it's really good that you know about the Common App before your kid has to apply, because particularly as homeschools, when you get ready to do the Common App, you have to sit down and you have to describe those courses. Sometimes that's the hardest thing. I can't tell you how many moms' hands I sat down and held. Sometimes I'm not even helping them write it. I'm just holding their hand saying, you're going to get through it. Like, oh my goodness, how do I write? What did I do?
You're like literally holding their hand?
I am.
Not figuratively, not the writer sure.
I'm just holding. I don't write because I don't even know what they did in the night. I'm just holding it saying you can make it, you can do it. So I would say that's a big weakness for homeschoolers, deadlines. And seriously, like, so it is with our kids even, like, so if we tell them to do a research paper, it's really important that we have a hard, fast deadline. And if they don't make that deadline, I know this is hard when you have teens, there needs to be a consequence. Because with my kids, my son would just let me forget. And I would say, wait a minute, Jared, didn't I? After he's PhD, he's doing well, A honors method, he's a PhD honors. But I would say, Jared, you were supposed to do a paper once. You go, oh yeah, Mom. And he counted on me forgetting. But now, whereas my daughter, Janae, she's even to this day, she's very, very, very extremely conscientious. If I signed her a paper, she would say, oh, Mom, I'm going to hand that paper in tomorrow, but I just need a little bit of time to proofread it. I was like, oh, yeah, I want the paper. I would have forgotten. Right. So it's just a difference in kids. But there had to be a consequence for my son when he didn't hand in the paper, because there's a consequence in life. There's a consequence in college if you don't hand in a paper. And so that's the other thing I would just say, homeschool is as your kids get to middle school and high school, let them be independent and give them a consequence for not finishing their work. You really shouldn't even be holding your kid's hand. I know this is like hard for some parents, but I'm really also in kids being independent learners. Now, those of you who have more than one child, it's really easy to be an independent learner because you have a life. But some parents are still doing too much. If you're still sitting down, I'm not here, let me qualify because I don't want parents to feel bad. I'm not speaking to someone who has a special needs child. But if your child is relatively independent in every other way, but you're still sitting down with them to do math, you're still sitting down with them to do reading, you're not really you want them to be an independent learner, because here's the point, and this is not competing with public school, but the truth of the matter is public school kids sit down, their parents don't know what the teacher's doing. I'm not saying it's right. Even in private schools, even in some of the most competitive elite private schools, you really don't know. And the kid has to say, gee, I don't understand this. I have to go get extra help. And it also helps as a parent, when they become teenagers, it gets hard. Hopefully it didn't happen with your kids, but it happened with my kids. And all the kids I've worked with, it happens with their parents, where they kind of get teenagers and they kind of like, we want them to be independent. They want to be independent. But if you're too much like right over them or doing everything, you're mommy and your teacher, and that's not good. Yeah. And the way to flip back to being mommy is to make them teacher. And that's why also you want to make sure you get as many other people as possible to help them with what they are going to achieve.
That's great information. A lot of good stuff in there. And I'm trying to think, okay, so what direction do I want to go? This is really good. So let's talk a little bit about the independence. I'll share a little bit about what I did to help. And then if you have any stories that you did and maybe some information on that. But let me see. I'll talk about my third kid, because I feel like I'm always talking about Daryl and then Sophia. Sophia's super my daughter traveled to halfway. She goes back and forth. She goes out of the country. So
she runs a nonprofit.
That's true. Yeah, I can't remember if I mentioned that on an episode or not, but correct. She actually started a nonprofit when she was 15. Matter of fact, she just messaged me the other day. She's like, what's a good time for our board meeting? And I'm like, 7:00 at night. People get off of work. Everybody's on the East Coast. So she's 17, going to her last year. And So I'm actually going to have her on because she's, before I digress, but anyway, we're going to probably walk the podcast through her last year journey, because I wasn't podcasting with Daryl's last year journey. But anyway, so I'm very intentional. So maybe part of it's selfish, because I like, I like a life. And even our youngest, I mean, my kids do laundry very early. At 5, I mean it, they're doing their own laundry. They know how to wash it. They can sort colors. I have a dispenser. You pump it. It's super easy to put the detergent in. I put a little a star sticker on the setting, so she knew what setting to put it on. So I did that. We have a saying, if you want to eat, you want your snack, everything is eye level. You can hang your own coat up. It's easy to get yourself bathed, dressed, all that stuff. So my kids are because I'm running a business now, and I'm a serial entrepreneur. I talked about in episode 100 when I kind of shared my backstory. So I've always pretty much had a business, and I had a brick and mortar business. I had a fitness studio that I owned for a very long time. So, I would leave in the evening to teach classes or, open up and, my instructors and all that. So my kids have always been independent, but some more intentional academic things that I've done. And I'll use Alex, my third one. He's 15 as an example. He's in a program called FAME, Forum to Advance Minorities in Engineering. And it's about 40 or so years old, because here's a fun fact. I tell him this all the time. I applied to get into FAME when I was his age, and I did not get into FAME. And so he says, "Is that why you make me do it? Because you didn't get in it?" I'm like, "Yep, that's exactly why." So he loves history. He wants to be a leader, like I said, serving the military. He wants to get into politics and all that. He's like, "I'm not going to be an engineer." Although in my mind, he definitely has an engineering mind. Out of all 4 of my kids, he's definitely I'm like, "Come on now, you can be my favorite kid. Come on, you want to be an engineer, right?" So I joke, but yeah, I do. So he's in this program, which he absolutely loves. It's twice a month on Saturdays. It's very rigorous in terms of it's classes. So they have English, math, technology, and science. And then summers, they're spending 6 weeks. And he started it in his 7th going into 8th grade, 6 weeks going in. And I believe he was the only homeschooler, because I remember when I had to submit a transcript and, his test scores and all of this to get in the program. And we were all a little nervous. We're thinking, okay, is he going to score high enough to get in? And he got in. And he just spent 4 weeks at our local university with the FAME program, University of Delaware, because it's a partnership with FAME to get minorities into engineering, kind of exposure and interest. Very rigorous. I didn't even share this on my social stuff other than my personal page, but he won several awards. He won the STEM research project, his group, his team. He won the most, whatever, one social award for a character, because he's such a gentleman. He's totally a gentleman. He's going to be the most incredible officer in the military, I think. So I say that to say, I throw my kids into environments where they are probably the only homeschooler, where you're going to be around traditional school students, where you're going to be immersed, you're going to have other teachers, other, people teaching and sharing. And so I say that to say, there really is no difference as a homeschooler. You still submit, the same paperwork, you go through whatever requirement, you may get in, you may not. It's the same process, but what we have to do, because of course FAME is, and programs like that are promoting in schools. So they're going in schools, they're working with guidance counselors. So as a parent, we have to seek these opportunities. They don't just always fall in our lap, but I do believe we attract things, I was able to find great art programs for Daryl early on, where he was exposed to some phenomenal mentors and classes and things early on. And Sophia, even with her advocacy, 2 of her mentors these 2 women are phenomenal in terms of their leading, girls, and very much in line with what she wants to do. So, but I think it's important to actively seek opportunities. Local universities are great. Community centers are great. Sometimes you can go to a school's website and find out, if they're posting their schedule in your local school district, what's the school district posting about summer opportunities. If you have a friend at your local church whose kid goes to the public school in your area, ask them, what are you guys doing? What are so any other tips and some of the things that you may have done as a homeschool mom to expose your kids to a broader range of opportunities?
Right. Now, can I answer that question, but add another important
You
point that
sure
you didn't
may.
ask me? But some homeschoolers run into this problem. So I'm going to answer it, but I'm going to also just mention a problem that homeschoolers run into. Particularly is the scholarship shark. Sometimes homeschools, because we spoke about mommy grades, I meant to mention this. And when you go, so when you're competing, so let's just say you're competing with a national scholarship. So a national scholarship, each millennial, um, I'm trying to think of some. Yeah. But a
Coca-Cola.
national, Coca-Cola, right? All those national scholarships. Sometimes when you're competing, you think as a homeschool, oh, I'm just going to put AAA and my kid will win over somebody else. There's always a process if your kid makes it to the finals where they have to authenticate those grades. Now, how do you authenticate it is that for most homeschoolers, with my kids, I would get, now I'm in a heavily regulated state. And that's what I was going to tell you, like for your students, some students, because you're getting homeschools all around. If your state is heavily regulated, even if your kid goes to a school outside of your state, the school will, and you have to adhere to your state regulations. So what that means is, for instance, if in New York State, in order for you to graduate, and there's 5 ways to graduate in New York State from homeschool. I won't get into all of them. But if some people would be like, I don't care, and my kid's just not going to follow that, and they get into a college and they also go to get financial aid, you have to follow whatever the state regulation is. And it's the same way with some of the private scholarships, particularly the larger ones. So I mentioned this, and I'll get into the reason why I mention this. Sometimes we homeschoolers have an adversarial relationship with our school district sometimes, and that's not good. And now I'm not saying to be a doormat or be abused, but I will say this: sometimes students are blocked, and I'm going to come back to answer your question. Sometimes students are blocked simply because you didn't authenticate it with the school district. Like, so for when my kids took classes at the community college, I didn't need the community college permission for them to take it. However, what I did do, and I was so glad I did it, when I reported back on my paperwork to my school district, I indicated they had also taken that class. When I do something that's extra special, so let's say we have a really great person, and unfortunately she probably doesn't do it online, but she does these great dissection classes. I hate dissection, but like so my kids had to do science, but they had to do labs. They did it with Dr. Teresa Rua. And so when they did those labs, and I put her name down and I reported it back to the school district. So why is that important? When I did the paperwork for them, when all of them at some point were runner up or whatever in the scholarships, because sometimes the scholarship will take you to the point where you get runner up, they'll sometimes want to speak to a teacher, which is why it's important that it's not, don't get mommy grades. You have to have somebody else, another teacher they could speak to, and that teacher, it could be a youth pastor, but make sure the youth pastor isn't going to try to evangelize them. That the youth pastor is just going to speak seriously on the kind of work that the kid does, or another teacher. And that's why I say I call myself the unofficial guidance counselor, because I've done that on behalf of many students, where I've gone and spoke for the student. There was one student who was getting a scholarship, and believe it or not, it was a big monetary scholarship, but I don't remember what it was. But the person called me and they said, "Oh, we're just authenticating." They didn't use that word, but that was pretty much what they was doing. Saying, "So did the person really do this? And did the child really do this? Did the child really do that? And then can you describe the child?" And then they asked me, they wanted to check to make sure that I wasn't, I guess, exaggerating. And they asked me, what did I do with the child? So the reason why I mentioned all that is that's an important aspect, because sometimes homeschools, we tend to be lone wolves, and we don't want to tell anybody what we're doing. We don't want anybody even to ask us what we're doing. We chose this program. This is the best program. It's between me and God and my husband, perhaps. And so the problem with that attitude is when it comes to scholarships, you won't have anybody to authenticate for you.
Yeah.
And so in my case, when my son won a really big scholarship, now I don't know how it is in any of the other states, but in New York, I had to from the school district, I had to send a school profile and had to put in like where we fell in that school profile. Thank God I had a relationship with the school. And I'm not saying that they did anything for me, because they didn't. But I had a relationship where I just said, and I typed it like, just verified it, all this. And the only thing they had to do, I didn't ask them to write a letter. That's another tip. I didn't ask them to write, like, just check off the list that this was, that my kid did this. And then it, it went back. So there's all kinds of opportunities you can give your kid to work independently. But I would also say, because my kids did pre-college, it's so much stuff. My kids did pre-college. I know other kids who did, who were auto mechanics, and they took apprenticeship with people who had automobile shops that you could write down and make it into a course. There's all those kinds of things that you could do to make them more independent. And just make sure if you're doing things outside the home that it's going to somebody else. It's going to somebody else. So that when you do compete for scholarships, you'll have that down.
That's such great advice. This is really good. So this has been a lot of information. and but I didn't want to stop it because it's just such great information. So I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit from college planning, because there's still more pieces with prepping, what you do in high school to prepare for college. So we won't really dive into that. I think this is plenty for the listener to chew on and to think about. But if we could talk a little bit more about scholarships. And so I'll start first. My one thing that I say generally is that as long as your student meets the eligibility requirement, you can apply. It may ask for a transcript, it may ask for some recommendation letters, but again, it won't be from you. It will be from someone. And again, all the more reason why it's great to have people outside of the home be a part of their learning community, their learning circle, because they just write. I think they just do so much better recommendations. And plus you need that. It can't be from you. And so, so if you're an avid podcast listener, I've talked about this on several episodes. One I was just thinking about, because I just shared with someone else, like what to do. It was an Ask Pam series where the mom said, we don't qualify for need-based aid. So I gave her, she asked, what are your top 10 best places to search? And I gave her all 10. So, there are plenty of scholarships out there. You don't have to worry about it. There are colleges, and when I say schools, I mean colleges or universities, that some even have separate homeschool, because it's sort of like three pieces. It's like the planning in high school, then it's the application and, finding a good school that fits, and then the money part. Not to mean like it's in that order that the money comes at the end, but they're like big chunks of information. And so, but there are schools that are either homeschool friendly, or some actually have a separate process or a person, maybe a separate department, not necessarily a separate department, but they'll mention on their website if you are a homeschooler, and many of them will ask for the test scores to validate those grades, things like that. So you don't have to be fearful. You've got a great example here in someone who's, 3 older kids have gone on. One is in his PhD program and doing very well. But that applying is pretty much, you're still going to do the same thing. You're still going to write your essays. You're still going to do whatever, the number of recommendation letters. You're going to complete all your basic demographics. You're going to have your reference letters, all the same things. There's no difference. And then, the scholarship piece, as long as they meet, you meet the eligibility requirement. Maybe it's a geography requirement. You have to be from this state or this county or this city, or maybe you need to major in this or that. There really is no, unless it, for some reason, would say students who attend this school or this school district, that there are those very specific scholarships for, specific, but that's like with anything, could be heritage scholarships where you have to be Polish American to apply, or, Asian American or Pacific Islander, so, I mean, there are different requirements on all kinds of scholarships. So I think what I want to say, and then I'm gonna have you kind of conclude, is that there is hope. I mean, and just listening to you, a family could sit and maybe, the mom may be listening, or maybe the mom and dad together, and maybe even the homeschooler would listen, but you don't have to be fearful, and you don't have to shut down and think, okay, I'm overwhelmed with the next step, that, I don't know what to do, and nobody does well, because they can go on and do very well. I mean, my son is like, he's doing super duper well, on campus. So, and Cheryl's kids the same. So we can set them up. There's some things we can do to be very intentional to set them up for success. It does require thought, intention, planning, a process. I'm big on systems, support. support is everything. You know, we didn't even talk about all the soft skills. Like I said, the stuff when,
Yeah.
when I was at my wit's end, and Cheryl threw out the lifeline and pulled me back. I mean, to have a support system and structure in place to help, because it gets hard, it gets lonely. You know, you may have family members. In my case, how long are you going to keep doing this? When are they going to go to regular school? Well, they're in regular school. You know, this is still school. So, you know, you have to deal with that. So, any final thoughts that you want to share?
Well, I would say it's interesting. I didn't get into it, but the soft skills are important. Some of the things we think that we're rushing, like getting along with others, is really important. So, like when you're thinking you're refereeing all the fighting that's going on in the family, it serves when they have to be in a dorm room that's really small, that's smaller than their bedroom that they didn't necessarily want to share with their sister. They have to now share it with 3 or 4 other people. And believe me, it saves money. The more people you can crowd into a dorm room, I know they don't like it, but it does. The other, if I would say one of the, and I came on saying I'm not going to get, let's try to stay inspirational and not get too specific, but there's one thing that I did do with all my kids. That's kids with the last name Andrew, with the last name Carter, and all the other kids I've helped. I do encourage parents to really work on the soft skills, particularly, does your kid know how to study? Do they know what to do when they don't understand something? Because one of the things I had to dread it, and most homeschool, unless you've graduated your first kid, you won't know this. But I remember when I graduated my son, I said, even though he really did well, he was on a scholarship, I said, they're going to find me out. They're going to find out I'm a fraud, that I'm not I'm not a good homeschooling mom. I'm not, and in his case, just so you should probably know this, I was helping other kids. It might be strange for you to say, but I was helping other kids long before my son got into college, which is kind of like I learned on other people's kids, but don't tell them. But I was helping other people's kids, but I kind of kept thinking, oh man, what didn't I do? Or he's going to get there, he's going to fall, and he's going to fall, and then not. And because part of the thing is, I had to release myself. You know, did he ever come back and say, Mom, you didn't teach this to me? Yes. I'm going to be honest with you. And my girls will come back and say, Mom, you didn't teach this to me. But you know what? You can't teach everything. You can't teach everything, and you need to give that up about being perfect. It's funny because I have people who will call me sometimes. So my undergraduate degree is in English, and they'll come in, they'll call me a lot, and they'll ask me a question. And they'll say, well, Cheryl, is this a dangling modifier, or what is this? And they'll give me a thing. And I'll say, I don't know. And they'll say, how could you not know? You have a degree in English. And I said, yes, that means I know a degree of very little of English. I don't know everything there is to know about English. Even when your kids graduate from the university, they will not know everything. Even doctors speak to other doctors. And yes, we want to go to a specialist, and they might know as much as possible that's in their finite brain in that specialty. But that's why sometimes they speak to other doctors. There is, though we are homeschooling, community is important. My kids reaching out to Pam, like the Andrew family, it's really important that we teach them community. It's really important that we do teach them those skills of how to go. If I don't understand something, what's the process I do? You know, to know that on campus there are tutoring places that they could go to. Some kids, adults come to me and they're failing the whole year. And I'll say, well, every college has a writing center. Every single college in the United States of America and abroad, I'm sure too, has a writing center. There should be no one, if you're worried about your kids not doing well on a paper, that's what you need to tell them to do, and you need to tell them to do it early. There's tutoring available. So I guess my advice is, I'm trying to think what it would be, was just work on your kids with those soft skills first, how to get along with one another. These are the things that's going to really irk you when you get to college. In that call, if they can't balance a checkbook. See, my kids got the cheap gene from their father, so I don't get those calls. But like I said, getting along, I've never had my kids not get along with a roommate. You know, and I've seen parents go through these elaborate things. Some parents are like, I'll pay extra money for my kid to be in a roommate by themselves. Or I've seen even parents lie just to get their kids in a room by themselves. My kid has a medical issue, so they need to be in a room by themselves. Work with your kids on those soft skills so that they can get along with everybody. And that's not to say there might not be some crazy kids in college that you might know what to, but you know, they're going to learn a lot.
Yeah.
And so I would say, don't beat up on yourself, and work with your kid on getting along, keeping those deadlines. There has to be a consequence when they don't do the deadlines.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that was good. That was good. So it's independent learning skills, um, uh, social skills in terms of working with others and, meeting new people. And because not only are you living together, like you said, in a smaller space in your bedroom, but it's with strangers,
Right.
Even though you may be friends and you may pick your roommates, you really are strangers coming in, and I'll share this quickly, but my son realized that he met who he roomed with his first year. They met at pre-college and they're still very close to this day, but he realized after the first, I don't even want to say the first year, first semester, probably the first month, they're very different people, and he said, we can't room together. And they never roomed together, but they're still best friends. They were talking the other day. So, but it's being able to, I think can be a comfort level, especially if you're teaching your kids to advocate for themselves and to speak up just in parenting in general. It's going to serve them well on a college campus. So, and beyond.
And I would agree, because that's a big issue that sometimes parents will call me. I'm talking about all my kids in general that I've worked with. I've rarely had kids have really major problems with roommates, because generally if I'm working with the parent, and even my kids, Andrew, all of them, we're working on those skills, those let's get along, can we say that in a different way, living with people who don't look like me, living with people who don't believe like me, but I can still have a conversation with them, living with people who we not only do we not think alike, they're just totally messy. And those are the things that we talk about the scholarship, but those are the things that are going to stress you as a parent, because no one wants to hear their kid calling them night after night when you can't, because that helpless feeling when your kid is in a really bad situation is like, ugh. But I can tell you one thing that I'm really proud of, I can say with my kids and most of the kids that I work with, they have always rose to the occasion. When I look at DJ is like such a gentleman that he says, yeah, he's my friend. We don't get along because I'm not out drinking or whatever, but
right.
We don't get along.
I didn't say that, but you're right. Okay. That's fine. But, yep.
Okay. But I admire DJ that he's still friends with this. And they didn't have these big, I look at my son, he had conflict with some of the kids. He said, well, I don't listen to music that has that kind of lyrics. But he lived with these kids and he lived with them in close quarters, and he didn't run and say, okay, let me get a room. And he probably could have. And my daughter, who was an introvert, but she still learned to live in quarters with other people who don't do things. And it was funny because she said to me at one point, she said, I called her one time, I said, where's everybody? She said, oh, everybody else went out. I'm the only one here in the dorm. And I was like, oh, do you feel bad about being by yourself? And she said, no. She said, unlike them, I don't feel the need to rebel against my parents by going doing stuff that they would never know I would do. So she said, I'm comfortable with doing whatever. And I was like, okay, so those skills, I would just say those are important. And I think also as a homeschool mom, like to forgive yourself, there's going to be things your kid's going to graduate and you're going to say, I never gave them a paper. I never discussed the real reasons for the American Revolution with them. I never did expressionistic art. You're going to look and say, and you have to just, it's something like my husband, something like so we have the older kids. So my older ones are 28, 24, and 22, 23. Anyway, I think she's 22. Yeah, she's 22. So I have from 22 to 28. The older ones, and then we have the 9-year-old twins. And so people come up, particularly in our church, and they ask, my husband all the time, they say, oh, it must be great to parent again. Never mind that. It must be great to parent again. You guys, you can fix all your mistakes. And my husband said so wisely, he said, we're not making the same mistakes. He said, but we're surely making different mistakes. I don't think any of us could be perfect. And I've given up the point of being perfect. I try to be the perfect mother I can be, where I am, with what I have and those resources. And that may mean that I'm working on getting a book out. That may mean I'm working on the deadline. That may mean I'm helping a person who's crying in church because their daughter just got diagnosed with leukemia and they just need somebody to talk to. That's who Cheryl is, and that's who God knew when he made me, and he gave these kids to me, whether your kids came to you through birth or adoption. He knew it, and he knew that's exactly what you needed. So some of my very weaknesses of not doing deadlines, or some of my very weaknesses of not covering certain things, has made my kids stronger learners, because they went and learned it on their own, and they become stronger because they know it now.
I agree. I agree. I have to say too, they will point out what you know and or what you did and what you didn't do. Because my Sophia, she'll say, "Well, you didn't teach me whatever," and I'm like, whenever you want to figure something else out, you definitely know how to how to figure it out. So it's funny how they'll try to throw you under the bus real fast, and I'm like, you know what? Okay, all right, you're okay. So this was great, Cheryl. And in closing, some couple things. If you have some wonderful resources to help families. Who are homeschool families, college bound kids. If you can share some of the resources that you have and the links where they can go to get this information.
Okay. I have, if you have, we didn't really discuss it, but I've helped kids who are special needs learners get in. So I do have a course and an ebook on special needs learners, like just things you should know to do, because that homeschool transfer, you want to do a little bit differently. But even some of your listeners who may not have homeschool, but they have special needs kids, they might want to listen. I'm not sure if if they're looking for scholarships for special needs students. I have a really great course, which is Secrets All Homeschoolers Should Know, but probably don't know about college admission. And those are like some of my best tips, not just from Micah, because I've helped so many kids in so many different places. It would just be too much to go in, but I give some really, really good nuggets in that course. And it's you could just put it on and listen. And I'm trying to think, what else do I have? Oh, how to really stand out to colleges. And that's not just for homeschoolers, by the way. It's just some of the ways I've helped kids stand out. And to be honest with you, Pam, I've gotten a lot of even that from you, because I kind of poked you in that course. Just to how you can get your kids to stand out to colleges. And so I'm offering for scholarship Shark people, if you use the coupon code, is when you go to checkout Shark, they actually can get as much as 25% off each one of the courses. So they could just, and I don't know when this is going to air, so it'll be on it for a while, Of course, I'm asking, make sure you're a scholarship, that you really are a scholarship Shark person to do that. But it's at CherylCarterCommunications.com.
Okay, and I will have that link in the show notes. So Cheryl, CHERYL, Carter, CARTER, Communications with an S.com. And just put Shark, the word Shark, in the code to get that discount. Thank you for offering that to my listeners.
The Shark should be in all capital letters.
Oh, that's good to know. All caps. Okay.
And by the way, we do take a portion of that and we give to nonprofits. So when you're doing with us, we also give to like nonprofits, like an orphanage in Kenya that we do help out with. And my daughter's involved in campus ministry. So if you're interested in, I know you have listeners from all over, but for those listeners who might be concerned what happens to my child when they go to college, we take a portion of that. Those are the two ministries we give to, and you'll see that also when you go.
Awesome. Thank you. So definitely, listeners, check out the resources and everything. I believe the course is complete. Is that correct? It's a comprehensive course.
It's complete. You can listen to it. You can go back and listen to it again. We have some handouts with it. So when I say ebook, like you'll download the ebook with the course. It's pretty. It is complete. I'm saying it's pretty complete. It's complete. It's basically because I don't, and I should probably say this to your listeners because so I'm not overwhelmed with email. In terms of the people I work with now, I really, just because of my schedule and things, I really am referring people to you. So I only want that because I don't want to get overwhelmed with requests saying, "Can you talk to me about my homeschool kid?" But if you listen to the course and you go to my Facebook group, I will answer questions in my collegiate learning Facebook group, but I don't have the time to work individually. So if you ask me some questions, I'm probably going to refer you back to Pam. She doesn't know that, but that's why.
And you've referred some people to me for college counseling. Thank you for that. Yeah. We refer back and forth. She's phenomenal with English courses. Are all your classes on your Cheryl Communications? I'm sorry, Cheryl Carter.
No, you know what? I probably should have mentioned. I have tons of online writing classes. That's what I do, and I do those live.
And you do those very well, by the way, too.
Yeah. So I have a college prep course for your kids to be prepared for college English and college writing, because statistically, I'm sure most of you know, kids have to be able to read and write. I think it's I don't want to misquote the statistic, but it's in the 90%. Like if your kid could read or write, even kids who are going to be STEM majors, they're going to do well in college. And matter of fact, my kids, all my kids, not just Carter kids, they've done well, and a lot of times going to the college because they've taken classes with me, helping other kids with their writing in college and making money because they're able to do that. I have a publishing class because my kids, not gonna say kids with the last name Carter, although I have a few other kids, I help get published. And so I do have a writing class on how to get published, and not just, no insult to anyone, not just self-publishing, but published in reputable journals in certain places, particularly if your kid is serious about being an English major or a liberal arts major. And actually even some of the STEM kids, it's real important that they write and get published, because there's one kid, actually two sisters, who got into MIT and they wrote a book just to get into MIT. They never wrote again, they hated writing, but I think that book gave them the edge to get into MIT.
Yeah.
So I have the college prep, the creative writing, and so those are the courses. So I guess I could say if they look on, can I give you my Facebook link? Like
absolutely, yeah. And I'll have all these links in the show notes. So if you're driving and listening, if you're listening on the treadmill, wherever you're listening, just go right into the show notes and click. Yes, go ahead and say it, and then and I'll also.
Okay, well, Facebook Collegiate Learning, and or my homeschool college prep, which is just for homeschoolers, and you'll see. Because I work writing, I do love working with kids with writing, and I still work. I'm one of the few people who probably, even in homeschooling, work with your kids one-on-one. So now let me be clear: they are in a class, but I mean I'm working with small groups of kids one-on-one, and they're getting feedback when they're writing from me.
Mm-hmm. So. My kids do, even though she's Aunt Cheryl, she's a great writer, and you scare Sophia. I have to say that. She's like, she's so hard on me. And I'm like, yeah, but you're better because of it. So suck it up, Buttercup. So yeah, so great. I have one final question, my fun question, and you should like this as a writer. If you could be any mascot, what would you be and why?
I would be a talking book. And I think about like a Walt Whitman or something like that, or even Maya Angelou, because one thing with a book, why I love a book, is that even if you disagree, I've had people disagree with me, and sometimes they're even nasty. I'll say, I disagree with everything you said, Cheryl, and what you said on page 93, and I'm thinking, why'd you keep reading if you disagree with me? So a book and writing really well, you can really get into the heart and mind of people. And vice versa, I've had people say, I changed my mind just by reading things that you've written. And I think even in the age of technology and everything, I still think it's important to hold a book in the hand. So I would be a talking book. I would be a big talking book that would probably come and hug kids and everything, because I still love kids and I still love little kids. So that's what I would be, a big talking book.
I love that. I love my mascot question. I think I might do just a whole episode, like just mascot, because you learn so much about people when they talk about who they would be. Much the way I tell students, college admissions officers want to learn about you when they're asking you all these quirky, weird questions. So, yes. Thank you, Cheryl. This was wonderful. Thank you to the listener who asked that question. I would have never thought to approach this topic from this perspective, but I knew Cheryl would add so much more depth to the conversation, so much more experience. And again, she is like the one who poured into me, held my hand literally, virtually, and we're just, I feel so incredibly blessed to have her in my life. Such good friends. So thank you, Cheryl. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pam.
You're welcome. Bye.